Smooth 98.1. This is Freshly Pressed. All right, it's Freshly Pressed, brought to you by FBN. Let's get into the show. As always, it's very interactive. We're looking at the news stories making the headlines across the country. Would love for you to be a part of the conversation. I'll let you know how you can do that. We're streaming live on our YouTube channel. It's Smooth981. You can post a comment on the live stream. You can also tweet at Smooth981. And you can, of course, send us a message via WhatsApp 0809 440 981. Now, this morning, I have a throuple group of analysts. So it's Lakule, Devoe, and Chibuzor. Good morning and welcome. And thank you.
Good morning. Good morning, President Zibby.
Good morning.
Good morning everywhere where you listening to us today. The elements combined to prevent me from reaching to the studios this morning.
Your village people. Good morning, world. Smooth, Lagos, a cool economic policy.
All right, so don't forget WhatsApp number 0809 440 981. First headline this morning comes from Vanguard. FG's policies crippling businesses, and this according to NECA, MAN, and Nasima. Devoe?
Well, in other words, most times these three institutions are referred to as the organized private sector organs. That's NECA, that's the Nigerian Employers Consultative Association. You also have MAN, the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria, and also NASIMA, that's the umbrella body for the Chambers of Commerce within Nigeria. Each of them met separately, but were pushing forward positions how the economic policies of the Tinubu Shetima-led administration have created some form of challenge for them. Like I said, private sector is usually instrumental in driving the economy forward, and that refers to business. And typically, or would I say, they called out directly part of where the challenges were coming from. NECA put it forward that the fuel subsidy removal policy, as well as the FX liberalization, where they harmonized the black market and the official rates, that had led to an increase in the cost of business, which has led to some pricing distortions. I mean, obviously, everybody understands from last year when the administration came on board how pricing obviously has gone way beyond what many people had planned. And obviously now we're reeking from what I call it, the impact. They also pointed out the high customs duty. Last year was around 980 to the dollar in terms of the conversion. This year it's at 1.5, meaning clearing has almost become almost impossible, and that's reflected in the reduced importation that's taking place. Manufacturers Association of Nigeria, MAN, pointed out that yes, the FX harmonization obviously affected them because those who manufacture usually have components that they import. And when you're importing at such a high cost, at the end of the day, your final product or your goods do not become competitive anymore, which obviously has led to the second point that they raised, which was power. Power is an essential ingredient in manufacturing. Many of the factories and the plants are running 24/7. And if you calculate the cost of energy, be it gas, be it diesel, be it PMS, it comes at a literally crippling cost. Not to talk of the electricity bill the subsidy has been taken off, and it's literally times 3. So obviously this has led to a level of inflation that has made it difficult for manufacturers. And manufacturing holds the basis of employment, which is where Nasima also pushed and said that the financial management in terms of rates and unemployment have made it completely difficult for them to operate. Well, in all of these challenges that they have pointed out, they're asking government to take a second look or review. And I think the Ministry of Finance and Economic Coordination is being called out in this scenario because this is where those who feel the pinch actually are talking. I think in some of the second stories we will highlight a bit of, I think, what is a good recommendation for government. Some of the policies that government have taken, though they've had harsh impacts, I think government did not follow through as to some of these moves, because you don't raise pricing or taxes or remove subsidies on the masses, and at the end of the day, you do not follow it up with complementary policies, at least addressing corruption, plugging some other areas to ensure that Nigerians can cope and businesses can have a way of buffer until these policies begin to make sense. I think that's where the gap is, and we'll throw a bit of light on that on the next stories.
All right, moving on to the next headline. This one comes from The Nation. Cholera kills 103 in 3,623 reported cases. And this headline comes from The Nation. Lakule?
Okay, so when we hear the number 3,600 and above, it's intrusive to say that according to this report, it's cumulative from January as reported by NCDC. The Director General of NCDC, Dr. Jide Idris, who coincidentally was, I think, a two-term commissioner for health or three-term commissioner for health in Lagos. Looking at the numbers, the reports highlighted Lagos, Bayelsa, Abia, Ebonyi, Katsina, and Zamfara states as the states leading, contributing 83% to the burden of the disease as to date. However, the point to note here is that this June, between June 21st and 23rd, there were 34 reported cases of death in 15 states. And so it tells me that in 6 months, what exactly have we done to prevent this? We might look at the number, we are 220 million people as they project, that 3,000 is small. But guess what? For those people who lost one person each, let's assume one person per family, it contributed this. That number is a lot, right? And I know that cholera has a vaccine. What is the status of Nigeria with respect to vaccination against cholera? We have many states that are surrounded by body mass of water: Lagos, Delta, Bayelsa, rivers. Even some of the northern states have one of the best rivers, the most voluminous rivers all year round. Kaduna, Niger, Benue. We hear of flooding in Loco, in Kogi, everywhere. Yet there is no potable water for people to drink. In many of these places, people resort to drinking water from unreliable sources. And the food we eat, the environment, the open defecation, all of these things combine to put all of us at risk of these things. Now, the advocacy part of it. Ask ourselves, the four of us here, have we had any advocacy on radio, TV, sponsored by government to warn us of the dangers of cholera and how we can contract them? Where do we go to? Where all these things are, we are too relaxed about this thing. And God help us, for example, in Lagos, it just needs one body mass of water surrounding Lagos to get contaminated. You can imagine the disaster it will be. So let's start from the prevention, good health, whatever, vaccination. What have we done about vaccination? I know that vaccine for cholera exists. What have we done? And so on and so forth. So those are the things that we need to be very careful about. We need to deal with so that somehow down the line, this number from 3,000 don't get to 3 million.
Okay, I'd like to quickly chip into this. So, luckily raised the question of vaccination, and I have a personal experience. So I have an.
We can't hear him.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Fantastic. So luckily raised the issue about vaccination, and I do have a personal experience. So I have a baby, and I think it was 2 weeks ago that's taken for vaccinations, and it was due for his cholera vaccination. And by the time we got into the hospital, luckily we have an HMO coverage that it didn't fully cover. They told us in the hospital, I think the price for the cholera vaccine had jumped from about 10,000 naira to about 42,000 naira.
Yeah.
So that's, if the government is going to roll out, you can imagine the cost that you have to spread and cover. But like you said, we're not hearing too much about it. There's no information. And, the truth is, when we look at cities like Lagos and even most of Nigeria, the design of where we live in, the design of how we supply water, the design of the entire state, where people stay, where people live. I was in the market yesterday and you could see dirt. You ask yourself, what access to water did they have? How are their hygiene processes? We don't have it. We lack it. And I think we need to rethink the way we see ourselves as human beings and redesign the way we live as Nigerians to be able to sort out a lot of these our health issues. At the moment, we can't really afford to be treating some of these things, so we need to think, how do we prevent them going forward? So that's my 5 cents on what just.
All right, and when it comes to educating people, perhaps citizens can also take up that responsibility. I think, sometimes we don't need to leave everything up to the government, right? We all have our parts to play, and I hope that even having the conversation this morning is going to do its bit as well. Let's move on to the next headline, and this one comes from Punch. Police foil attempt to raise Delta INEC office. Chibuzor?
So, the crux of this story is there was the Supreme Court judgment in Warri, Delta State.
We can't hear him.
Sorry, the crux of the story is that there was a Supreme Court judgment in Warri, Delta State, and the outcome of it was that there was supposed to be delineation of if electoral wards are units within the area. In compliance with that judgment. What the Punch is reporting is basically that we have a lot of some young men armed with weapons and substances that they believe to fuel, chanting war songs, and they are making their ways to force their way into the INEC office, purportedly to set it aflame. So the police has swooped in and police prevented that action. And at the moment, the INEC officials have visited the Gwaramatu Kingdom in Warri. I can continue on that, but that's basically what the issue is. I think INEC also visited the headquarters of the traditional ruler to try and engage. But when I think about this, I think I come from Delta State, so one of my first visits as an adult to Delta State was years ago after I just left university. And I went to Warri actually specifically. Driving to Warri, I remember seeing sandbags, and it reminded me of all those pictures you would see after a war situation where soldiers are set up sandbags and barriers to prevent people from fighting. And I recall that I think they had just finished the last Warri crisis. So this was what had been left over. And I was wondering how people could, within a small space, decide to set themselves into war within a small town where they are basically lived with one another because of things that could have been resolved by just talking to each other and agreeing on the next steps forward. And unfortunately, we see a new generation that have been set on that path. And when I say set on that path, obviously it's not these young guys who are just bringing up the ideas in their head. They have been told that this is what needs to happen, this is what they're trying to do to them, and this is how they need to act on it. While they might have their concerns, I believe that there are solutions to these things. Most of these things are driven by political fears of funding, a lot of reported second person ideas or ideals. And I think that, instead of just sweeping the issues under the carpet and trying to push them forward to another day or another generation, discussions need to be had about how do we go forward progressively. So I do hope at some point somebody actually takes it upon themselves to actually call these guys together and say, what, let's resolve these issues. Let's get these young people into doing things that are more profitable to themselves. Because at the end of the day, when they set ablaze their INEC office, at some point they're going to rebuild that and they're going to take that money out of the same taxes and funds that should have been used for something else. It's counterproductive carrying out some of these actions, but we do need to educate our young people a lot more. We need to educate ourselves a lot more, because at the end of the day, these things are driven by forces that are farther away from these young people. So I do hope that the police are able to prevent them from going for action. I do hope INEC and serious-minded individuals in these communities are able to step in and get these things on the right path. Let's continue with progress. At the end of the day, if we've chosen to go on the path of democracy, let's walk that walk. We need to see it through.
All right, let's look at some of the messages that we have coming through. This one is from Ajayi, and he says, no doubt that the economic policies of this administration, from the removal of subsidies, evaluation of Naira, the Forex market, and even the interest rates, are crippling businesses due to the resultant galloping inflation and low purchasing power of the masses. Government must take a second look at these policies in order to ameliorate the situation. Abbas says a lot of these manufacturers don't come out to tell the truth of how the government has been helping their businesses. There are loads of waivers granted manufacturers for the importation of their equipment and machineries. There are dedicated chapters of the custom tariff that are exclusively reserved for manufacturers, which reduce the duty paid to government by them. In fact, a lot of revenue is lost because everyone now goes for duty exemption from the government. That's not to say that the government cannot do more to make life better for the citizens. A circular was issued just a few weeks ago on duty-free pharmaceutical raw materials, their machinery, and food products. Ginka says, in the words of the king in the north, he says, we shouldn't vote for anyone who claims things will be easy. Some of us anticipated the challenges we face today. It's perplexing that organizations like ASEMA, NECA, and MAN didn't grasp this reality. Where were they when 7 billion naira was trapped in the country? There are reports of manufacturers receiving foreign exchange from the government under the guise of importing raw materials, only to divert some for personal gain. Did they address this issue? It's common knowledge that FX availability during the last administration was a big lie. Perhaps it's time to reconsider our reliance on imported raw materials and explore local sourcing options to conserve scarce foreign exchange. You're listening to Freshly Pressed on Smooth 98.1. More headlines shortly. Stay with us.
What I see
Chibuzor, sometimes
I do know where they. No, I'm being very generic.
Okay.
I do know where they're coming from. I don't understand
Right.
their messages. But it's at the end of the day, we need to understand that these things it's input output. Manufacturers are going to defend their own position. It's about profit for them.
Right.
The thing is, like, the government
manufacturers
is
don't
right.
owe any resources to Nigerians apart from paying taxes and paying whatever. If the government chooses to waive on those things,
Well,
it's our loss.
right.
So we should stop seeing those guys as people that expecting other people should do this. Yeah, people have responsibility. If you fail to do it, that's why government exists.
What do you mean?
Yeah.
It's Freshly Pressed on Smooth 98.1. Zibby here, and we have our analysts, 3 analysts this morning. This might be the first time that's happened, but always makes for a great conversation. Lakule, Chibuzor, and Devoe with us. Keep your messages coming. We'd love to read from you. 0809 444 981. We're also streaming live on our YouTube channel, Smooth 981. And you can, of course, post a comment on there as well, or just tweet or X at Smooth 981. Next headline comes from, I believe this is the Punch. Ex-governor asks appeal court to vacate arrest warrants, adjourn case indefinitely, and return file to CJ. Devoe?
Hi, can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Okay, this story actually shouldn't be a story because it's just about. Yes, I'm saying it's just about the continual dragging of corruption, alleged corruption cases that we never get to see the end of. So in basic terms, the ex-governor of Kogi State, Yahaya Bello, obviously has taken advantage of the not so strong judicial framework to post for a vacation of his charge at the appeal court. So the case which is in the federal high court obviously will pend until the court of appeal position has been vacated. Now, the problem here is, yes, he's being charged for the misappropriation of about 80 billion naira through some money laundering charges, which till date we are not going to see the end of until they get through the legal hurdles, which I refer to as judicial gymnastics. And this is usually how most alleged corruption trials follow suit. And basically, I mean, the country is ripe with a whole library of corruption cases like, the current issue on Beta Etu and 500 million, how that was misappropriated. Some even say in some papers that she's come back to work silently because she's sending memos under the ministry letterhead. But we haven't heard any outcome from the EFCC or from the government as to what happened. Same case with Sadia Farouk, which she's yet to even come and confirm the alleged 720 billion, which is almost a trillion, that was spent through the Ministry of Disaster Management during her time, which is still the same pending issue on the NDDC minister, will you off your mic, which we never got to hear the end of, which is still the same pending 10 trillion that was spent through the Anchor Borrows program in the last administration, which is still the same 30 trillion that puts us in a large debt situation in this country with the ways and means. I mean, it goes on and on and on and on. And when you have all these judicial gymnastics, which almost make it look like the judiciary is only here to serve the well-oiled and healed, then at the end of the day, it's almost safe to say that there's no consequence in this country, which is why either at the local government or at the state or at the federal level, corruption keeps having the headway. Now, I told you I would highlight this because this is the aspect that is making nonsense of the brilliant economic policies that this administration has been formulating. You can't just heap the load on Nigerian citizens. Let them carry the weight of what was not done. And at the end of the day, you don't plug it, because it's when you plug these leakages of corruption that you begin to see the impact of some of these economic policies. Well, it's up to Nigerians. We actually need to hold governments accountable at every level. But the truth is, if government does not show a keen sense of urgency on addressing some of these corruption cases, honestly, till the end of this administration, we're not going to see the effectiveness of brilliant economic policies.
All right, thank you, Devoe. Let's move on to the next headline. And this one is coming from The Nation. Crisis deepens as court stops PDP Congress in Rivers. Chibuzor?
Jumping on the back of Devoe's last comments, there's another judiciary gymnastics, and what we do have is, and as everybody know by now, in Rivers State is a mess, for lack of better words. So obviously this manifested within the PDP, and it's obviously overtaking the rest of the government. So what we do have is that there's a court ruling that was that restraining the leadership of the PDP from holding its proposed Congress. A high court sitting in Port Harcourt yesterday restrained the party from conducting a Congress, which was scheduled for the 27th of July. The suit was filed by 11 plaintiffs against the chapter, the national chairman of the PDP, financial secretary, and organizing secretary. And basically, they cannot proceed with their Congress. Now, there are various issues happening in the state. The current governor versus the former governor and his supporters. There is also the outcome of that issue, which is the local government elections and the ability of the current government to be able to either get in the administrators to continue managing the local governments, or to have a new elections. And one of the decisions from the court also stopped the PDP from taking any additional decision or directive to further extend the already expired tenure of the world local government and state executive officers of the party. The court has adjourned the matter to July 19th for the motion on the notice already filed. So they have stopped them from doing any actions, but they filed this to July 19th. I would take a slightly different approach from Devoe on the issue of judiciary gymnastics. Unfortunately, our laws, like every other laws, in a lot of countries, do contain parts that can be exploited by individuals, and that's why we have people going to go and spend time in school to learn about the law. So, based on how much, if you can get a good lawyer, he would find something that he can present. And while it can be sad and it can be frustrating on the citizenry and on the people who want to see quick actions and to hold people accountable and for things to just keep moving on. What tends to happen is that over time, the expectation is that we will test out those laws. We will get these laws to be properly interpreted by the Supreme Court at the end of the day at some point. And we would set precedents for future, future engagements with the judiciary. So I do hope at some point, we would have tested our laws and gotten to the part where we can actually hold all of them accountable and everybody knows what to expect when we go into the states. But yes, as we see at the moment, politicians will take advantage of some of these laws. The sad thing about it is that we are so entrenched in the politics of politicking than actually in the politics of development in this country, and the people will lose out, and people are losing out. Holding the local governments and not having proper work being done by the local government are affecting the people at the grassroots level. All the gymnastics happening in the states, within the governor, the ex-government, and people are dancing and singing songs and wearing new clothes. The people at the end of the table are suffering, looking for palliatives, looking for food to eat. Let's sort out those issues. Let's stop all this politicking. That's all I'll say about the River State issues. And at some point, I hope they will not be news again.
All right, let's move on to the next headline. This is from Punch. Food security reps invite CDS defense minister over what they're calling ungoverned spaces. Lakule?
So the chairman, House Committee on Defense, Honorable Jimmy Benson, made this known where he said that they're inviting the Chief of Defense Staff. To my mind, I assume that this is an internal security issue. And if it is internal, then I think that the person they actually should be inviting is the IGP, the Inspector General of Police, because that's their job. The job of the military is to protect the country from external aggressors, except that we are classifying this matter as a matter of external aggression. Having said that, now I looked at the report and there were two things here that are said that blows my mind. One, he says that, let me read verbatim, if there is food security, insecurity will go down. So the army should take possession of their land. Let's say they have 1 million hectares somewhere. There is not going to be insecurity in that area because it's going to be manned by the military. Now, the Nigerian military, the entirety of Nigerian military setup is about 250,000 personnel. We are 20 million people. That's an average of about one soldier to about 1,000 or I can't do the math in my head, but some big figure like that, right? And then Nigeria is 926,000 square kilometers. So if we also look at that ratio of one soldier per square kilometer, what does that give us? So how can it be possible that we'll have enough men to occupy 1 million hectares? That's one. Then the second part that I also want to bring forward is that it says, I got reports from my military people. They told us that there are a lot of ungovernable spaces, areas where no civil government present exists. So if that is the case, what are we doing to strengthen first the police? At this table, we have talked about what we need to do about internal security. We cannot keep doing the same thing the same way I expect a different result. We have to do something different from what we have been doing. All the monies that has been spent in the last 10 years, 20 years, equipping the military is coming to naught because, okay, so we have all those equipment, but you don't have enough personnel. You have personnel, you don't have the intelligence. People are not even trusting enough to give the military or the police intelligence reports as to the movements of these people. So it's not just enough to call this. We must be ready to do something different. And that's something different. We can spend the whole day discussing it. I know I'm short of time, so maybe we can take it off this and continue online and continue to have these debates. We need to help our government. Our government needs to help us. Like they say in my village, two good heads are better than one.
All right, thank you, Lakunle. Toye via WhatsApp says, I feel real pity for Delta State, a state that had Delta Steel, a thriving bottling company, oil companies, to a state where the biggest industries are the POS and religious organizations. Let's see. Yinka says Devoe's last statement hit the bullseye once again. But where were Nasima, Neka, and Man during the whole CBN ways and means issues? Are they claiming ignorance of its implications? That's all the time that we have. Unfortunately, we can't read all your messages, but thank you for listening. Thanks for sending them in. And special thanks to our analysts this morning, Chibuzor, Lakunle, and Devoe for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, President Zibby, for having me this morning again. Have a great day.
You.
Cheers. All right, Chibuzor.
Bye.
Bye.
And that is it for Freshly Pressed this morning. Thanks for listening. Do stay with us. There's a lot more to come on the Smooth Breakfast.
Freshly Pressed. Thank you.